really big issue and conversation that's not being had in Britain is about integration, assimilation. How do we talk about what it is to be British? That even having a common language is somewhat controversial.
Mm-hmm.
We're always told diversity is our greatest strength. No, unity is our greatest strength.
Yeah.
How is that hard to say? Just say it. Like, isn't that patently obvious? And by keep pushing this diversity, which is literally division, things are getting worse.
If we were to remove ourselves from all of this, from sort of the political craziness of the day, the type of things that you're talking about on your podcast, I mean, what really interests you and drives you? Obviously, this, and you're worried about your country and the future of free speech and things like that. But I sort of sense that that's just been kind of put on your plate, in that if things were better, you might be talking about some other things, which, by the way, I feel about myself too at times.
I'm sure. One thing I've noticed, well, firstly, as I mentioned earlier, I feel a sense of duty to speak about issues that people feel like they can't speak about. But one thing that's also made my life easier is that there are so many issues that mainstream media aren't prepared to touch, that you can do really great stuff. So I've just done an interview with James Lindsay about the Red-Green Alliance and where Islamism and woke meet. I've done various stuff on immigration. I've just been out in Israel with our mutual friend Douglas Murray, did amazing. Thank God for that man.
Yeah,
I know he's been on your show a bunch of times, but he at least is able to articulate what is brilliant about Israel and Britain and America.
Why doesn't Britain have more Douglas Murrays, more people that are, like, I know he's one of a kind and he's a gem, but why aren't there 1,000 people like him speaking up? It just purely comes down to that fear thing.
He's certainly a courageous man. He's certainly courageous, but the thing is, Britain was built on courage. It was the courage that we stood up to the Nazis. We stood up to Napoleon, and obviously we had some help from the you guys for the former. But
don't worry about
it. And the Russians. But we are a country that's here's like maybe an example of like how I'm concerned it's not just cowardice, but apathy that's killing Britain. So just to tie it back to something earlier I said in the conversation. After 7/7, which was the attack on public transport in Britain in 2005, there were various things. We were prepared to talk about Islamism, and there were various things brought up, like the PREVENT program. Fast forward to, let's say, the Manchester Arena attack, as I've already discussed, and the reaction was hope, not hate, love, and love, not, like peace and love. And it wasn't like we were ignoring the other thing, but we were like saying, like, come on, let's try love. Like, let's try this as the alternative. Now with these incidences, like the Mike Freer thing or the marches through London, it's just silence, because everyone knows the problem, but people are too terrified to speak. And what we need is more Douglas Murrays, more people to stand up and call it out. And hopefully we can get to a critical mass where we're talking honestly again. And I don't know what that's going to take. And I think there are lots of courageous people in the country, but I wish they would stand up.
So since you're a free speech guy, where do you draw the line, or do you draw the line when it comes to some of these protests, some of the things that are being chanted that we've discussed already, people calling for a global caliphate and that England will be a Muslim country and all of these things? You want more people to speak up, but what do you do about the people that are calling for pretty noxious things right now? We have our own problems with this. Obviously, we have a First Amendment that you guys don't have.
We've got this
on top of the fact they're blocking traffic and they're doing things that are outright illegal that nobody's doing anything about.
Well, the issue of free speech is an interesting one because, and this, like an American free speech advocate would grate with my opinions on free speech. And what's the famous example in America where there was some Nazis?
Skokie, Illinois, 1972. The neo-Nazis marched in. It was the largest concentration of Holocaust survivors in the United States. And the ACLU, which was a somewhat sane organization back then, defending free speech, they defended their right to do it as long as it was not violent. I would say it's different than what's going on now, but let me get your take. Why is it different? It's different than what's going on now because now they are not getting permits. They're blocking roads. They're blocking tunnels. They're outwardly calling for genocide from the river to the sea. They're assaulting people. Like, it's way more than just a planned march down one street on one day. When I was in New York City a couple of weeks ago, I had the guy that was picked me up at the airport, drive me to the hotel, was telling me, this is like a hardcore New York City, who happened to be a black guy, who's probably about 65, 70 years old. He's like, yeah, we just call them Jihad Sundays, and they just take over. They have their jihad for a day, and it's just like, and he's moving out of New York City, lived there his whole life. He's like, I've just had enough. I'm leaving now, going to North Carolina. But that something has shifted from, okay, you guys want to march on one day with a permit in a given place. Okay, fine, express your free speech, even for the noxious things you're going to say, versus calling for genocide, versus purposely targeting Jewish businesses or going to the Jewish areas or stopping ambulances. I mean, literally shutting down bridges. You can't do that, but it's happening in your country too. So although I haven't heard your answer yet, I suspect I'm going to be a little more in line with your response on this.
I think if inciting violence is clear and simple, it's illegal.
Right. But no one's really doing anything about it in either of our countries.
Right.
Yeah.
Where the line which true American free speech advocates would come down, or let's say you had someone like Glenn Greenwald, I think he's actually talked about this, is that he wouldn't take umbrage with the slogan from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free necessarily, and he would defend that as a free speech issue. It's a tricky one, and even like, let's say, a term like intifada, there's open calling for intifada on the streets of London. That is the calling of violent uprising.
Yeah.
So, or jihad, like calling for jihad is, I mean, there's various definitions of the term, and this is where it gets problematic. Is
right.
All these words have different definitions.
Which is by design. Also, they know they can't go out there and say kill everybody, so they say these coded things. I'm not saying
in this country, are you allowed to show open support for, let's say, Al Qaeda or Hamas at this point? Are you allowed to legally?
Well, legally, I think you could say, they will fact check us on this. This is the internet. I think you can say you support Hamas. That is a free speech. You can use your right to free speech to say that. You can't give material support to them, meaning raise funds for them or things of that nature. But I think we're getting close to the place where even that is not going to be able to be allowed. I don't know. What would they have done if 2 weeks after 9/11 you were out on the streets saying you support Al Qaeda? I'm not exactly sure what the answer is. But again, this goes to that gray area now between speech and support.
But as in Britain, the rule is you're not allowed to express support for a prescribed terrorist group, which would in this case be Hamas. So that is illegal in Britain. But
again, everyone at these rallies is doing it in essence by default in a way.
Yeah.
So what would your position be? I mean, do you feel like Britain should be doing
rule that prescribed groups like Hamas, Hizb ut-Tahrir, Islamic Jihad are prescribed, and if you support them, absolutely you should be locked up. We need to clamp down. This is an absolutely serious, fundamentally serious issue. It's tearing at our social fabric, and if you have those opinions, they are not. Why are you even in Britain? Like, how can you?
Well, they're in Britain to take Britain. I mean, that's the sad reality, right? Like, isn't that like the cold, stark, hard truth that everyone kind of knows?
I think it's more complex than that. I think that there are some, there are certainly some who are like that. As I mentioned earlier, there are 38,000 jihadis in Britain. So there are some. It gets more complicated because there are millions of people in Britain who support Palestine and who might argue Hamas are freedom fighters or something, even after October 7th. And so I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah.
specifically.
No, it's well, that's why I'm asking you. It's complex, and we have different laws related to all these things. And,
Yeah.
and I think generally speaking, all of the free speech people, and there was a big, I think, were you at the dinner at the Night of the Ark thing? Were you guys there? We got into there were like 40 of us. It was like a Rubin Report reunion debating what to do about this. And I'm personally more on the side that you have to make some more arrests related to this stuff. They're using our freedoms against us. And it's like, it's great to be a purist, and it's great but when enough people are stopping commerce and closing roads and calling for jihad, it's not safe for your own citizens, and not enough good people are standing up. So there are some weird, I suspect, let's put it this way, I suspect that the average person in Britain 20 years ago, if they could have figured out a way to put a clamp on this 20 years ago, they would have done it.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't do it. That's your point. And it's led to a lot of this. And that, I think, also would go for France and Belgium and Sweden and a whole bunch of other
the French have gone a whole other length where you're not allowed to show any religious symbol in a public building. So you can't wear a crucifix in a school. Mm-hmm. That was their way of dealing with the issue of multiculturalism. We haven't really no one's worked out what the answer is, and no one's even really having the conversation about, because look, the free speech issue is an important one, and as I've already said, it's going to become really big, particularly over the term Islamophobia in Britain. Mm-hmm. But the really big issue and conversation that's not being had in Britain is about integration and assimilation. How do we talk about what it is to be British? That even having a common language is somewhat controversial. Mm-hmm. We're always told diversity is our greatest strength. No, unity is our greatest strength. Yeah. How is that hard to say? Just say it. Like, isn't that patently obvious? And by keep pushing this diversity, which is literally division, things are getting worse.
If you're looking for more enlightening conversations about international issues, check out our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.